3 minutes ago. That's the phrase exploding across screens. Comment sections, group chats, late-night voice notes. 3 minutes ago, something changed. And the question people are whispering right now isn't small. It isn't polite. It isn't comfortable. What if the story everyone thinks they know was never the full story at all? What if the most protected narrative in modern royal history wasn't about love, exile, or power, but about motherhood? Take a breath for a second. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because before anyone jumps to conclusions, before outrage or disbelief kicks in, there's something important you need to understand about why this moment feels different from every rumor that came before it. This isn't just another headline. It's the timing, it's the silence, and it's the sudden movement that nobody expected. Ask yourself this. When was the last time a story resurfaced so fast, so aggressively, that even people who swore they were done with royal drama stopped scrolling? Exactly. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. Stories don't come back from the dead unless something feeds them. So what fed this one? Let's rewind. For years now, there have been whispers online, commenters connecting dots, amateur timelines, long threads that most people laughed off, ignored, or dismissed as conspiracy chatter. And honestly, that's fair. The internet is loud, messy, often wrong. But every once in a while, a rumor survives not because it's proven, but because it's never fully answered. And unanswered questions have gravity. They pull people back in. They refuse to settle. They sit there quietly until the right moment, then explode. Right now, that explosion is being fueled by one phrase circulating rapidly across social media. The palace revealed something. Notice the wording. Not confirmed. Not announced. Revealed. A word that implies something hidden. Something reluctant. Something that wasn't meant to be public. And then came the next line. She's not the biological mother. No context. No documents. No names attached. Just a claim moving faster than facts can catch up. So let me ask you directly, and answer honestly. If this were completely baseless, why now? Why this week? Why the sudden urgency? Why reports? Again, reports, not confirmations. That Meghan Markle allegedly rushed back toward the UK at precisely the moment these claims resurfaced? Coincidence? Or reaction? Here's where the story gets uncomfortable. Because whether you believe these rumors or not, movement matters. Silence matters. Timing matters. And the royal family has always understood one brutal truth. Perception shapes reality long before facts ever do. That's why royal communication is slow, careful, almost surgical. Which makes this moment stand out even more. No immediate denial. No warm, reassuring statement. No clear dismissal. Just quiet. And quiet is dangerous when speculation is loud. Now, let's slow this down, because this is where most people get it wrong. This story is not about proving anything. It's about understanding why people are reacting the way they are. It's about unpacking how a narrative grows legs. And it's about asking why certain questions keep resurfacing no matter how many times they're brushed aside. Because here's a surprising fact most people don't realize. In royal history, some of the biggest scandals weren't exposed by proof. They were exposed by patterns. Patterns of avoidance. Patterns of delayed response. Patterns of no comment. And every royal watcher knows this. Which is why longtime observers aren't focused on the rumor itself right now. They're focused on the response to it. Or lack of one. Let's talk about the word mother for a moment. Because biologically, legally, emotionally, that word carries layers. And when it comes to monarchy, those layers carry consequences. Titles, succession, public trust, legacy. Even questioning the topic, not confirming it, not denying it, is enough to trigger alarm bells behind palace walls. That's why this rumor hits differently from gossip about outfits, interviews, or family feuds. This one touches the foundation. And foundations are where institutions get defensive. Now add another layer. The internet today doesn't wait. It doesn't verify. It doesn't pause. It decides. Within hours, people were already choosing sides. Some saying, this is cruel. Leave it alone. Others saying, if it's false, why not shut it down immediately? And then came the contradictions. Royal commentators disagreeing with each other. Tabloids hedging their language. Mainstream outlets avoiding the story entirely. That split alone tells you something important. When media can't agree on how to handle a story, it usually means nobody has clean answers yet. And into that uncertainty stepped one more rumor. That the palace didn't intend for anything to come out. That the information allegedly surfaced through a leak, not an announcement. Leaks are different. Leaks imply internal tension. Leaks imply disagreement. Leaks imply someone thought the truth, or their version of it, mattered more than protocol. And if that's even partially true, then this story isn't about Meghan alone. It's about a system under pressure. So where does Meghan fit into all of this? Right now, she doesn't need to say a word to become the center of the storm. Because people are interpreting everything. Her absence, her movements, her silence. And fair or not, public figures don't get the luxury of neutrality during moments like this. Silence becomes a statement. Travel becomes a signal. Timing becomes evidence, even when it shouldn't. And this is where empathy matters. Because at the center of this speculation is a child. A real child. And that's why this story feels heavier than most. It's not just gossip. It's not just clicks. It's not just entertainment. It's about identity. About truth. About the consequences of rumor culture colliding with royal secrecy. Which brings us to the question nobody is asking loudly enough. What happens when an institution built on image control meets an internet that doesn't care about decorum? Something breaks. And right now, it feels like something is cracking. Not confirmed. Not exposed. But strained. And that strain is what we're going to unpack, piece by piece, throughout this story. We're going to look at where the rumors started, why they never fully disappeared, what allegedly resurfaced now, and why reactions, not revelations, are driving the narrative. No assumptions, no conclusions, just examination. Because whether this story collapses tomorrow or grows larger, one thing is already true. The silence has spoken. 3 minutes might feel like an eternity when a rumor refuses to die. But for some stories, years aren't enough to bury them. And this one, it has been lurking, quietly, in comment sections, behind paywalls, and in whispered conversations that most people never hear. Until now. Let's start at the beginning. Everyone thinks they know the timeline. Meghan Markle marries Prince Harry. They welcome Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor, and the world applauds, or scrutinizes, depending on which side of the royal debate you sit. But underneath the headlines, beneath the official photos and carefully curated statements, something unusual began to take shape. Observant fans and skeptics alike started noticing inconsistencies. Small ones at first. Offhand references in interviews, social media posts deleted and reposted, timelines that didn't quite line up. Individually, these details were harmless. Together, they formed a pattern that couldn't be ignored. Patterns are dangerous things. They make us question what we think we know. They make whispers sound louder than official statements. And in this case, the pattern kept returning to one central point: questions about Archie's origins. Now, we're not saying this is proof. Not by any measure. But the rumors simply refused to fade. It persisted across years, evolving quietly, gaining followers who dug into archives, cross-referenced statements, and analyzed every timeline. Some dismissed it as conspiracy fodder. Others couldn't shake the feeling that there was something they weren't being told. Why does a rumor like this survive? Partly because of human nature. People are drawn to mystery. We hate gaps in information. And in the absence of clarity, imagination rushes in to fill the void. The internet amplifies this tendency. A tweet, a forum post, a blog article. Each one acts like a stone thrown into a pond, and the ripples spread far beyond the original splash. Within hours, months, and sometimes years, these ripples coalesce into a persistent narrative, hard to ignore and even harder to dismiss entirely. For royal families, rumors are nothing new. They've existed for centuries, fed by courtiers, journalists, and the public alike. What makes this one different is timing. Every other whisper faded when addressed with controlled communication or simple diversion. But this particular story was different. It survived the public's short attention span because it wasn't fully addressed, ever. And when a rumor survives that long, it starts to take on a life of its own. People begin connecting dots that may or may not be there. They assign motives that may never have existed. They start speaking in certainty about matters that remain unverified. And here's the kicker. Even when a story seems dormant, history shows that dormant rumors can explode when the right conditions arise. All it takes is a minor trigger, a leaked email, a subtle timing slip, a casual remark during an interview, and suddenly, everything once dismissed as irrelevant becomes a topic of urgent conversation. That's the situation we're looking at right now. So, what made this particular rumor linger? One factor is the blend of visibility and absence. Meghan Markle, once a constant presence in global headlines, stepped back from official duties. Her reduced public profile didn't make the rumor go away. It made it grow in the shadows. Fans, critics, and media outlets filled the vacuum with speculation. Every appearance, every statement, every silence was scrutinized for hidden meaning. And when you combine that scrutiny with the natural human instinct to question, you get a perfect storm for a rumor that refuses to die. But there's another element that can't be ignored: the emotional stakes. This isn't just a story about celebrity or monarchy. It's a story that touches on family, identity, and truth. People are drawn to narratives that feel personal because they resonate with our own experiences and fears. When you mix secrecy, perceived betrayal, and a high-profile family, you create a story that feels intimate, no matter how distant the subjects actually are. And that intimacy makes the rumor more compelling, more shareable, and ultimately more dangerous for those involved. To understand the power of this story, consider the timeline. From the first hints of speculation to the current, allegedly explosive revelation, each phase has reinforced the narrative in subtle ways. Deleted posts, vague statements, carefully staged photos. All these small details act like breadcrumbs leading observers down a path. Some followers notice, some ignore. But collectively, these breadcrumbs form a trail that few can resist following. And once the trail exists, once the path is visible, curiosity and doubt become intertwined. You can't separate one from the other. Another critical aspect is context. Royal scandals don't exist in a vacuum. They intersect with media culture, public perception, and social media amplification. One journalist's caution can be counterbalanced by a blogger's bold claim. One editorial choice can spark a viral thread that takes on a life of its own. The longer the rumor persists, the more embedded it becomes in the collective consciousness, making it increasingly difficult to dismiss entirely, regardless of its veracity. But here's something that often gets overlooked. Even dormant rumors shape behavior. They influence decisions, movement, and strategy, especially for public figures under constant scrutiny. Sources familiar with the inner workings of palace life have long suggested that off-the-record discussions often revolve around potential leaks and lingering speculation. Anticipating how the public might respond to a rumor, even one unverified, can shape official responses, appearances, and communication strategy. This means that what seems like inaction or silence is sometimes a calculated choice designed to manage perception while avoiding escalation. And this brings us to the key point. The rumor's persistence is not just about public curiosity, it's about influence. A narrative that refuses to die becomes a tool, sometimes for those seeking truth, sometimes for those seeking disruption. The palace, Meghan Markle, and even media outlets operate within this ecosystem of influence, where a single rumor can trigger strategic adjustments across multiple fronts. In short, a rumor isn't just a story. It's a force that shapes behavior, decisions, and even relationships. So, when we talk about the rumor that never died, we're not just talking about idle chatter or online conjecture. We're talking about a narrative that survived scrutiny, evolved through ambiguity, and gained enough traction to shape real-world consequences. And that's why the latest alleged revelation, the one that supposedly prompted Meghan Markle to rush back to the UK, carries so much weight. It isn't just a claim. It's the next chapter in a story that has been unfolding quietly for years. What makes this moment particularly striking is the combination of immediacy and magnitude. 3 minutes ago, according to reports, everything shifted. That's fast. That's dramatic. And in a world where timing is everything, 3 minutes can change perception, strategy, and narrative. Social media exploded, commentators scrambled for analysis, and viewers found themselves caught in the tension between rumor, speculation, and potential reality. And yet, amid all this noise, there is one persistent question that nobody can answer conclusively. Why now? Why did this rumor, dormant for so long, suddenly gain the traction that it did? Why is it being framed in terms of revelation, not confirmation? And why is Meghan Markle allegedly reacting by returning to the UK? A move that adds urgency and drama to an already volatile situation. These questions are critical because they highlight the intersection of timing, perception, and human emotion. They also underscore a central theme. Stories do not exist independently of those who engage with them. Rumors gain power not merely because they are heard, but because people act, react, and interpret them. And that reaction, in turn, shapes what happens next, creating a feedback loop of speculation, action, and further speculation. To put it simply, a rumor that never dies can control the narrative even without proof. It can drive decisions, shape public opinion, and influence the actions of those at the center of the story. And that is exactly what appears to be happening here. So, as we move forward into the unfolding drama, keep this in mind. This story is not just about what is alleged. It is about how a narrative survives, evolves, and asserts influence over time. It is about the tension between secrecy and exposure, between rumor and reality, between perception and truth. And as we dive deeper into the chapters that follow, you'll see how small inconsistencies, lingering questions, and unspoken tensions can combine to create a moment that feels explosive, urgent, and inescapable. But just when you think you've grasped the scope of this rumor, something happens that changes everything. Sometimes, what isn't said speaks louder than what is. And in the world of royals, silence isn't accidental. It's strategy. It's a shield. It's a way to control perception without ever confirming or denying a single claim. And right now, that silence is louder than any statement could ever be. Think about it. The palace has decades of experience managing controversy. Every public statement, every press release, every carefully staged photo has a purpose. Every word is weighed for its potential impact on public perception, media coverage, and historical legacy. They know that overreaction can be as damaging as underreaction. And they know that rumors, even unverified ones, can spiral into global attention in hours. In short, the palace does not speak without calculation. So when news allegedly surfaced that Meghan Markle might not be Archie's biological mother, the immediate reaction wasn't a denial. There was no press conference, no formal statement, just silence. And that silence, in itself, is meaningful. Because in the world of royal communication, silence is rarely neutral. It is deliberate. It is protective. And it is often the first sign that the story is bigger than anyone outside those walls realizes. But why silence? Why avoid addressing something so explosive? The answer lies in perception. A hasty statement can lend credibility to an unverified claim. A denial can inadvertently validate the question. By remaining silent, the palace maintains control of the narrative. They avoid giving the rumor legitimacy by acknowledging it directly. And yet, that very strategy also fuels speculation. Human psychology is clear. When people expect answers and receive none, imagination fills the void. Silence becomes a canvas, and anyone willing to speculate paints the picture. In this case, the speculation has been relentless. Historically, the palace has used silence in strategic ways. During scandals involving lineage, succession, or personal relationships, they often opt for carefully timed communications, letting the story cool before deciding how to respond. Sometimes this involves subtle signals in interviews or social appearances. Sometimes it involves behind-the-scenes diplomacy with journalists and insiders. Silence, in this context, is a tool, one that preserves options and prevents escalation. But it is also a double-edged sword. In the age of social media, a single hour without comment can feel like days, and a day without comment can feel like weeks. Every minute of silence amplifies curiosity, suspicion, and engagement. And that's exactly what happened here. For hours after the alleged revelation, global audiences were left watching, waiting, and analyzing every movement. Was Meghan seen boarding a plane? Did palace aides appear unusually tense? Which journalists were given access? And who was ignored? Each observation became a data point for speculation. Each pause, a signal. And every observer, knowingly or not, became part of the unfolding narrative. It's important to note that silence doesn't always indicate weakness. In many cases, it indicates preparation. Decisions involving reputation, legacy, and family must be measured, deliberate, and carefully orchestrated. The palace is an institution that cannot afford missteps, and the stakes are enormous. Titles, succession, public trust, all are influenced by perception. And in matters involving alleged paternity, every word carries consequences that extend beyond the immediate moment. Silence buys time. It allows strategists to assess, to plan, and to anticipate. But silence is also provocative. It invites interpretation. It encourages debate. It challenges assumptions. And in this case, the palace's quiet response, or perceived lack thereof, ignited a new wave of speculation online. Social media feeds filled with questions. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Insiders claim that behind palace walls, reactions to rumors are rarely uniform. Not everyone agrees on strategy. Some advisors favor rapid clarification. Others advocate delay. Some push for minimal acknowledgement. Others suggest strategic leaks. These internal differences can create tension, misalignment, and, occasionally, inadvertent signals that reach the public. It's a delicate dance, one in which the timing of silence can be as telling as any official statement. Consider the emotional calculus involved. A rumor questioning the biological parentage of a child is uniquely sensitive. It isn't about fashion, philanthropy, or public appearances. It's about family, identity, and legacy. Every potential response carries moral and emotional weight. Overreacting can appear defensive or guilty. Underreacting can seem callous or dismissive. Choosing the right balance requires an acute awareness of public perception, historical context, and human emotion. And this is precisely why silence often becomes the initial strategy. At the same time, silence creates pressure. The longer it continues, the more speculative narratives fill the gap. Analysts dissect every movement, reporters interpret every detail, and social media algorithms amplify every whisper. What began as an internal concern can rapidly become a public spectacle. The palace must manage not just the facts, but the stories created by absence of facts. And in this modern era, that task is more complicated than ever. But let's step back for a moment and ask, why does this matter to the public? Why are millions of people around the world suddenly engaged in what feels like an intensely personal family drama? The answer lies in storytelling. Humans are wired to respond to drama, tension, and unresolved mystery. A narrative involving secrecy, power, and alleged parental questions hits every emotional trigger. It combines stakes we understand, family, identity, legacy, with stakes we observe from a distance, royal protocol, public perception, historical precedent. The result is irresistible, and the palace's careful silence only heightens that intrigue. And therein lies the paradox. Silence is intended to contain the narrative, to prevent escalation, and to protect those involved. Yet in the current media environment, silence almost guarantees amplification. The absence of words becomes a signal, the lack of statement becomes proof to some, and the delay becomes news itself. Each hour of careful calculation feeds a global audience hungry for answers. Each strategic pause becomes a source of anxiety, speculation, and commentary. And this tension drives engagement in ways that direct communication cannot. Yet, behind the scenes, those orchestrating this silence are not passive. They are analyzing reactions, measuring sentiment, and preparing contingency plans. Every rumor, every narrative, every online thread is monitored. Every response, or lack of response, is evaluated for impact. The palace does not leave perception to chance. Silence is deliberate. It is tactical. It is powerful, but it is also risky. And in the case of this alleged revelation, the stakes are higher than usual. The silence also serves another purpose. It forces attention. By withholding immediate comment, the palace ensures that when they do choose to speak or act, the message carries weight. In an environment saturated with opinion, emotion, and speculation, the first confirmed words or actions are magnified. They become the defining moment, the pivot point from rumor to narrative. And right now, observers are waiting for that pivot, for the move that will either confirm, deny, or redefine the story entirely. Yet for Meghan Markle, this silence may carry additional consequences. As a central figure in the alleged rumor, her movements, statements, and decisions are scrutinized more intensely than anyone else's. Every hour of inaction, every delayed response, becomes fodder for analysis. Every social media absence or appearance is magnified. And in a situation involving alleged family questions, the stakes are deeply personal. It's no longer just about public perception. It's about relationships, identity, and potential reputational damage. So, when we examine the palace's silence, we see a complex strategy in play, one that balances risk and reward, perception and reality, privacy and publicity. The silence is protective, tactical, and deliberate, but it is also a source of tension, speculation, and emotional amplification. And as observers, we are caught in that tension, watching, waiting, and questioning. And just when it seems that the silence might continue indefinitely, something shifts. A minor slip, a hint of movement, a subtle signal in an offhand comment. And suddenly, the carefully chosen quiet is no longer just a shield. It becomes a catalyst. When you line up the dates, the story starts wobbling. At first glance, everything seems orderly. Marriage, pregnancy announcement, birth, public appearances. But for those who watch closely, obsessively even, there are inconsistencies that refuse to be ignored. And once you notice them, the cracks begin to spread. Let's start with the basics. The official narrative, as presented to the public, paints a simple, linear picture. Meghan and Harry meet, marry, and a child is born. The media reports milestones. Photos are released strategically. Interviews are carefully timed. Everything appears controlled, seamless, pristine. And for most of the public, that's the story they accept. It's tidy. It's digestible. It's designed that way. But timelines are tricky. They are one of the few things that cannot easily be manipulated without leaving traces. Every post, every announcement, every trip is a fixed point in time. And when you compare them side by side, you begin to see subtle tensions. A deleted Instagram post here, a vague statement there, a public appearance that doesn't quite align with an official report. None of these alone is proof of anything. But together, they create a map of questions that refuses to lie dormant. Let's take a hypothetical example. A public appearance is recorded on a certain date. Weeks later, a media outlet reports an event that allegedly conflicts with the same timeline. Observers notice the discrepancy. Forums light up with debate. Was the reporting incorrect? Was the timing misunderstood? Or was something more significant happening behind closed doors? That is the essence of the timeline controversy. Now consider the early months of Archie's life. According to public reporting, Meghan's pregnancy was announced at a specific point. But some observers noted references, interviews, and posts that seemed inconsistent with that official timing. Not glaringly obvious, not dramatic in isolation, but enough to fuel speculation among those paying attention. Was it an innocent oversight, a miscommunication, or a clue, subtle, deliberate, or accidental? That the public was not being told the full story? Then there are the travels. Meghan and Harry moved between continents multiple times in the years leading up to and following Archie's birth. Each flight, each official engagement, each private visit becomes a timestamp in the story. And with the scrutiny of social media, timestamps matter more than ever. Observers began comparing known travel dates with public appearances, interviews, and even casual social media posts. The result? Minor inconsistencies that, while explainable individually, collectively became difficult to ignore. It's important to note that timelines in the royal context are not merely historical notes. They carry weight. They influence narratives of credibility, consistency, and transparency. Every public figure relies on perception of reliability. And when a timeline is questioned, it introduces doubt, even unintentionally. In this case, the alleged discrepancies opened a gap that rumors could rush through. One particularly interesting moment comes from a casual comment made during an interview. A date mentioned offhand seemed to conflict with official reports about Archie's age or the timing of Meghan's pregnancy announcement. Fans noticed immediately. Analysts dissected the interview, paused frames, compared dates, cross-referenced travel logs. Within hours, social media threads were alive with speculation. Does this mean X? Why would this date be wrong? Could this be the first sign of a bigger inconsistency? And here's the pattern. Once one inconsistency is noticed, others suddenly seem to appear everywhere. The brain searches for connections. The public narrative begins to feel less like a story told by officials and more like a puzzle missing key pieces. Every small detail becomes significant. Every casual remark is dissected. Every absence becomes meaningful. But timelines are treacherous. They can mislead even the most meticulous observers. Misreported dates, time zones, casual rounding of ages, and vague statements all create apparent contradictions that are actually harmless. Yet the effect on public perception is powerful. People don't always notice the nuance. They notice the tension. And that tension is enough to make a rumor feel credible. Consider also the human factor. Memory is imperfect. Interviews are edited. Social media posts are scheduled. Timing errors happen constantly in public life. But when a rumor exists, those minor errors are magnified. They are no longer accidental. They are interpreted as deliberate, secretive, or misleading. And that's exactly what has happened in this case. Minor timeline ambiguities have become the scaffolding for a narrative that challenges the official story. Another layer complicates the timeline, the reporting itself. Different media outlets publish conflicting accounts, often without clear sources. A statement reported in one paper is later contradicted by another outlet. Social media threads amplify every nuance, and within hours, confusion multiplies. The timeline, once a straightforward record, becomes a battleground of interpretation. And in that battleground, the public searches for truth, filling in gaps with assumptions, speculation, and sometimes imagination. And yet, amid all this uncertainty, one fact stands out. The timing of recent events seems more urgent than ever. Allegedly, the palace revealed information that prompted Meghan Markle to move quickly, possibly returning to the UK. Observers immediately cross-referenced this with previous dates, travel schedules, engagements, and known timelines. The result was a flurry of discussion, with every detail analyzed for hidden meaning. Every minute of movement became a potential clue. What makes timelines particularly volatile in this case is the convergence of personal, familial, and institutional stakes. We're not just talking about a public figure traveling or making statements. We're talking about a child's identity, a family's reputation, and the integrity of an institution that thrives on order and protocol. When dates conflict or appear inconsistent, it is not merely an academic matter. It becomes a trigger for speculation, rumor, and ultimately, media frenzy. And here's the emotional beat that makes this story compelling. People don't just care about timelines because they're curious about facts. They care because timelines suggest intent. When dates are interpreted as inconsistent, observers begin asking, what is being hidden? Who is making decisions behind the scenes? And most importantly, why does this matter so much? These questions tap into fundamental human instincts, concern for truth, justice, and the well-being of those involved. The final point about timelines is this. Once a discrepancy is noticed, it becomes a lens through which all future events are viewed. Every action, statement, or movement is filtered through the question, does this align with the known timeline? And when a key player, like Meghan Markle, allegedly reacts suddenly, by traveling back to the UK or making an unexpected decision, that reaction is interpreted in light of past inconsistencies. Suddenly, history and present collide, and every small detail carries weight far beyond its immediate context. So, the timeline doesn't just wobble. It shapes perception. It fuels speculation. And it primes the stage for the next act. The past, the present, and the alleged revelation converge, creating a story that feels urgent, explosive, and inescapable. And as you will see in the chapters ahead, this wobbling timeline is just the beginning. What if the story wasn't about Meghan at all? What if the narrative that had consumed headlines, timelines, and social speculation was, in part, about someone else entirely? That's the unsettling question circulating behind closed doors, in hushed discussions, and across the darkest corners of the internet. And once that question is asked, it refuses to be unasked. Whispers of another woman in Archie's story have been around for years, though rarely articulated publicly. Observers noted subtle patterns. References in interviews, mentions in biographies, cryptic remarks on social media. Alone, these instances seemed insignificant. In isolation, they were easily dismissed. But rumors, like shadows, grow stronger when fed by ambiguity. And over time, the idea of another woman in the picture began to stick. It's important to stress, there is no verified confirmation that this other woman exists or that she has any role in Archie's birth. This is rumor, speculation, and alleged insider commentary, amplified by social media and global fascination. Yet for a story to grip the public's imagination, proof is not always necessary. Suspicion, secrecy, and perceived inconsistencies are enough to spark debate. So where did this whisper originate? Sources online trace it to a mix of anonymous insiders, leaked claims, and interpretive reporting. Forums and social media feeds dissected every public appearance, interview, and event. The result? A mosaic of speculation that increasingly suggested a second figure behind the scenes, a woman who allegedly had a biological connection to Archie. Observers dissected the timeline, comparing known facts about Meghan's pregnancy, travel, and appearances with supposed gaps that might align with this unidentified figure. And here's what makes the whisper so potent. It introduces doubt at the core of the narrative. Questions about lineage, timing, and transparency are not inherently sensational. But when a second woman is suggested, suddenly the story touches on the most primal of human curiosities: identity, family, and truth. People are wired to respond emotionally to these questions. They aren't just intrigued, they are compelled to analyze, debate, and form opinions. Think about the psychological impact. The allegation of another woman, even unverified, introduces tension, mystery, and drama. It challenges the official story and raises immediate questions. Why hasn't this been addressed publicly? Who benefits from keeping this secret? Could the presence of a second figure change our understanding of past events? And most importantly, what does it mean for Archie? Insiders claim that within palace circles, even rumors of this nature spark intense debate. Staff, advisors, and family members are acutely aware of how damaging the perception of another woman could be, even without confirmation. Reputation, legacy, and public trust are at stake. Every whisper is monitored, every leak analyzed, and every potential exposure weighed against historical precedent. From the public's perspective, these whispers gain power precisely because they remain unnamed and unconfirmed. Anonymous sources, by definition, provide tantalizing information without accountability. They can ignite speculation, provoke outrage, and fuel engagement, all without being pinned down. Social media algorithms, ever hungry for engagement, amplify these narratives exponentially. Within hours, a single unverified claim can dominate feeds, trending lists, and conversation threads worldwide. And here's the twist. When a rumor involves another woman, it shifts focus away from timing, schedules, or minor inconsistencies. Suddenly, the story becomes intensely personal, ethical, and emotional. The public begins to speculate about motives, relationships, and hidden truths. It's no longer a story about media coverage. It's a story about people, choices, and potential betrayal. And in a royal context, where image is everything, even whispers of alternative parentage are seismic. But not everyone accepts the narrative. Critics argue that speculation about another woman is irresponsible, cruel, and likely false. They point out the lack of evidence, the dangers of rumor culture, and the impact on real people involved. And they are right. Unverified claims can cause real emotional harm. Yet in the digital age, controversy spreads faster than correction, and speculation often outpaces verification. The story's momentum is almost impossible to stop once it has reached a tipping point. It's also worth noting that the whisper interacts with existing public tensions. Meghan Markle's visibility, Harry's actions, media coverage, and previous controversies all provide a fertile environment for speculation. Observers draw connections, fill gaps, and create narratives that feel coherent, even if they are entirely constructed. In this context, the idea of another woman is not an isolated rumor. It is part of a broader ecosystem of intrigue, secrecy, and fascination. What makes this whisper particularly dramatic is the timing. Allegedly, the revelation that prompted Meghan to rush back to the UK coincided with renewed speculation about this second woman. Observers immediately connected the dots, interpreting her movements as a reaction, a statement, or a strategy. Each interpretation fuels further speculation, creating a cycle of action and reaction that is hard to break. And let's pause to consider the human element. Rumors about another woman are not just about intrigue. They are about relationships, emotions, and trust. For fans, critics, and casual observers alike, the story becomes a puzzle. Every detail, every historical reference, every ambiguous comment is scrutinized for meaning. And the emotional stakes amplify the narrative. People care not just about the rumor, but about the implications, the morality, and the potential fallout. At this stage, the whisper has become a lens. Everything else, the timelines, the palace's silence, Meghan's movements, is viewed in light of the possibility of another woman. Actions are no longer neutral. They are interpreted as responses to hidden realities. Statements are no longer informative. They are analyzed for subtext. And every pause, every delay, every subtle signal becomes fodder for speculation. In other words, the whisper changes the story entirely. It doesn't just add a character. It reshapes the narrative. The rumor that once lived quietly in comment threads now looms large, influencing perception, engagement, and analysis at every level. And for Meghan Markle, the alleged presence of another woman intensifies scrutiny, emotional pressure, and public fascination. And then comes the chilling part. Observers note that when such a whisper is combined with perceived inconsistencies in timelines, silences from the palace, and sudden movements by central figures, the story becomes explosive. The rumor that once might have been dismissed now commands attention. It provokes questions. Who is this woman? What is her role? Why was this information allegedly withheld? And most importantly, what will happen next? The answer is unknown. But one thing is certain. Whispers of another woman have transformed the narrative from a question of timing and behavior into a deeply personal, emotionally charged story. And as the chapters unfold, we will see how this whisper interacts with other elements. The timeline discrepancies, palace reactions, media amplification, and Meghan's own alleged response, to create a story that feels urgent, high stakes, and impossible to ignore. But just when it seems the whisper is all we have, a name begins to surface in private circles. Not confirmed, not public, just a detail floating beneath the surface, waiting to collide with the rest of the story. And once that detail is noticed, the narrative shifts once again, dramatically, irreversibly, and with consequences that no one fully anticipates. 3 minutes ago, headlines began circulating. Meghan Markle was allegedly rushing back to the UK. Panic? Strategy? Or something far more complicated? Whatever the motive, the timing was explosive, and it set the stage for one of the most dramatic chapters in this unfolding story. Let's start with context. Meghan and Harry have traveled extensively over the past few years, balancing private life with public appearances. Each movement is documented, scrutinized, and dissected by media outlets and fans alike. When they travel suddenly, especially to the UK, it sends signals. Signals that are interpreted, theorized about, and debated endlessly. And in this case, the alleged timing of Meghan's return coincided perfectly with rumors regarding Archie's biological parentage. The overlap was immediate and impossible to ignore. Observers immediately began cross-referencing flight logs, official engagements, and social media activity. Within minutes, a narrative started to form. Meghan's sudden return was not merely a casual visit. It was a reaction, a direct, urgent response to a revelation that had allegedly surfaced from the palace. The story, already fueled by whispers, timelines, and silence, suddenly gained kinetic energy. The public felt the tension. The media felt the tension. And social platforms lit up with debate and speculation. Why would Meghan return so urgently? Analysts speculate several possible explanations. One theory suggests she needed to address the alleged revelation personally, confronting either the source, the palace, or other insiders. Another posits that the move was strategic, a calculated attempt to reclaim narrative control before rumors gained further traction. And a third, darker interpretation, fueled by whispers of another woman, suggests emotional motivation. A mother rushing to protect her child, shield a secret, or assert authority over a story spinning out of control. But let's be clear, we are discussing alleged movements and reported speculation, not verified facts. Yet the speculation itself is part of the story. Because in the digital age, perception often shapes reality more than verification. How people interpret her actions, the timing, and her choices has already influenced global conversation, even before she allegedly landed. And here's where drama escalates. Meghan's alleged return intersects with palace silence in a combustible way. The institution has been deliberate, controlled, and measured in its response, or lack thereof. Silence, as we discussed in the previous chapter, amplifies speculation. Meghan's sudden movement, reported in near real time, breaks that quiet. The combination of a strategic void and sudden action magnifies tension exponentially. Observers can't rely on statements to interpret the situation. Instead, they interpret her timing, body language, and past patterns, reading between the lines in a way that fuels speculation rather than clarifies it. But what does this say about urgency? Sudden travel is rarely casual. For public figures, it requires logistics, planning, and coordination. Private security, flights, staff, and media handling all demand preparation. If Meghan indeed returned on short notice, it implies a response that was immediate and intentional. And immediate responses are almost always prompted by significant developments. Something happened, or allegedly surfaced, that required her presence. And the speculation around what that something is has dominated discussion ever since. Now consider the emotional stakes. Public reaction is one thing. Private emotion is another. Sources close to Meghan reportedly suggest a mixture of concern, determination, and urgency. Whether driven by personal emotion, maternal instinct, or strategic necessity, her alleged actions convey intensity. This intensity, interpreted through media coverage and social media speculation, amplifies public perception of the drama. The narrative is no longer just rumor. It is interpreted action, and action carries weight. Observers have also highlighted the symbolic nature of Meghan returning to the UK. After stepping back from royal duties, her travel decisions were always closely watched. A sudden return signals engagement, intent, and involvement. Even without a statement, it is read as a message. She is present, alert, and responding. Whether the response is defensive, protective, or strategic is debated endlessly. And the ambiguity is deliberate, or at least unavoidable. In the world of high-profile families, ambiguity is a tool as much as a consequence. The media's role cannot be underestimated. Journalists, commentators, and social media influencers immediately amplified the story, analyzing every detail, departure points, arrival times, possible airport sightings, and anecdotal evidence. Hashtags trended, threads exploded, and opinion pieces multiplied. Even those skeptical of the rumor were drawn in by the spectacle. And in this amplification, Meghan's alleged return became more than a logistical event. It became a narrative catalyst, forcing the story forward and adding urgency to speculation surrounding Archie's parentage. Now let's add another dimension: the interplay with whispers of another woman. The alleged revelation that prompted Meghan's return is reported to intersect directly with those whispers. Observers have speculated that her presence in the UK could be aimed at clarifying, confronting, or managing these sensitive rumors. Whether true or not, the combination of a sudden return and unresolved whispers adds layers of complexity, tension, and intrigue. It elevates the story from speculation to perceived crisis. And here's the crucial insight: perception in this context can be as impactful as reality. Even if the alleged events are misinterpreted, misunderstood, or inaccurate, the public response is real. The narrative gains momentum, trust shifts, and global attention is locked in. Meghan's alleged return, therefore, is not just about travel. It is about influence, narrative control, and emotional stakes. Her presence in the UK, interpreted through the lens of rumor, silence, and whispers, becomes a pivotal moment in the story. But with urgency comes risk. Rapid movements can trigger misreporting, fuel new rumors, and escalate tension. Observers immediately debated why Meghan had not publicly addressed the alleged revelation. Some interpreted the lack of statement as confirmation of secrecy. Others viewed it as calculated discretion. Each interpretation fuels further speculation. And in the digital age, speculation spreads faster than clarification, creating a feedback loop that is almost impossible to control once momentum builds. Finally, consider the emotional resonance for the public. The idea of a mother rushing to protect her child resonates universally. It introduces empathy into a story dominated by intrigue and speculation. Whether viewers accept the rumors or not, the narrative taps into primal concerns, parental protection, family loyalty, and maternal instinct. And this emotional component ensures engagement, discussion, and continued attention, a perfect storm for a story already fueled by secrecy and rumor. So, as the world watches, Meghan Markle's alleged return acts as both action and symbol. It signals response, invites interpretation, and accelerates the narrative. The palace's silence, the whispers of another woman, and timeline inconsistencies converge in a moment of heightened tension. And the consequences, emotional, public, and reputational, are just beginning to unfold. In a story fueled by whispers and timing, the sudden appearance of a document can change everything. It can turn speculation into obsession, rumors into headlines, and private anxiety into public frenzy. That's precisely what happened when a document, its origin still contested, allegedly leaked from palace sources and made its way to journalists, bloggers, and social media feeds worldwide. The content? Explosive. The implications? Far-reaching. The document reportedly contained details about Archie's biological parentage, timelines, and internal communications that had never been made public. Even without verification, the very existence of such a document created shockwaves. Because in the world of royal reporting, leaks are powerful. They're proof of access, proof of internal knowledge, and proof that the official story may not tell the whole truth. And when the content touches on something as sensitive as a child's lineage, the potential for chaos multiplies exponentially. What made this leak particularly compelling and dangerous was its timing. Allegedly, it surfaced just as Meghan Markle was making the decision to return to the UK. Observers quickly connected the two events, the leak as the trigger, Meghan's flight as the response. Even before the contents were analyzed or verified, the narrative had accelerated, moving from rumor to immediate, high-stakes drama. The public was now watching a story unfold in near real time, complete with intrigue, secrecy, and a sense of urgency. Let's break down why the leak mattered so much. First, it allegedly challenged the official narrative. Every previous explanation, timeline, and public statement was suddenly cast in doubt. If true, the document implied that there were aspects of Archie's origins that had been intentionally withheld or misrepresented. That alone would be significant. But the emotional resonance, the potential implication for Meghan, Harry, and the palace, amplified the story. Identity, legacy, and trust were suddenly in the spotlight, intertwined with speculation about secrecy, motivation, and public perception. Second, the leak was a catalyst for media amplification. Journalists and commentators immediately seized upon it, dissecting lines, highlighting phrases, and questioning authenticity. Social media exploded with analysis, screenshots, commentary, and speculation spread faster than the speed of official confirmation. Once a document is public, it becomes almost impossible to retract the narrative it inspires. Every detail, verified or not, enters the global conversation, magnifying tension and scrutiny. Third, the leak added a layer of strategy to Meghan's alleged return. Her travel, which may have already been planned or expedited, could now be interpreted as a response to the document. Observers began theorizing. Was she confronting palace officials? Attempting to assert control over the narrative? Protecting Archie from public exposure? Or reacting to something more personal? Anger, betrayal, or shock? The ambiguity of motive, combined with the explosive nature of the document, created a perfect storm for speculation. And the emotional stakes were immense. For a child, whispers of alternative parentage are more than sensational. They are existential. For parents, perceived misrepresentation or hidden truths create tension, anxiety, and urgency. And for the palace, leaks challenge authority, reputation, and operational control. Each actor in this drama, Meghan, Harry, palace staff, and even the media, is navigating a minefield of perception, credibility, and public scrutiny. It's important to understand that leaks like this are rarely accidental. They often emerge from internal frustration, strategic calculation, or mismanagement. But the impact is always immediate. Suddenly, private matters become public, timelines are questioned, and reputations hang in the balance. Even if the content is disputed or partially false, the psychological and media consequences are real. Rumors gain momentum, public opinion shifts, and the narrative, once controlled, spins out of official hands. Observers also noted that the document's alleged content raised questions about communication patterns within the palace. Who knew what, when, and why? What internal discussions had been held regarding Archie's parentage? And perhaps most importantly, why had this information never reached the public or Meghan until now? These questions created new layers of intrigue, forcing analysts and the public alike to consider motives, consequences, and hidden relationships. And then there was the timing relative to previous events. Meghan's alleged flight, whispers of another woman, and minor timeline inconsistencies all converged in a perfect narrative storm. The document, whether fully authentic or partially fabricated, became a narrative pivot. It changed how the story was perceived, how people reacted, and how events were subsequently interpreted. Suddenly, everything, from previous social media posts to recent palace statements, was analyzed through the lens of the leak. Emotional beats amplified the narrative. Readers, viewers, and followers felt urgency, shock, and curiosity. The story was no longer a distant speculation. It became immediate, personal, and dramatic. People weren't just consuming a rumor. They were witnessing a crisis unfold. And the emotional intensity guaranteed attention, engagement, and sustained discussion. Yet, even as the document circulated, uncertainty persisted. Questions about authenticity, sourcing, and motive remained unanswered. In other words, while the leak added fuel to the fire, it also deepened the mystery. Every reaction, every interpretation, and every reported movement by Meghan was filtered through the ambiguity created by the leak. And ambiguity, as we've seen, drives engagement like nothing else. Finally, the leak set the stage for the next dramatic chapter. It forced all parties into a heightened state of tension, prompting reactions, calculations, and decisions that might otherwise have been delayed. And as observers watched, the story accelerated, pulling everyone, palace, media, public, and Meghan herself, into a spiraling narrative that seemed impossible to control. In the world of high-profile families, private conversations are supposed to remain just that, private, confidential, shielded from public scrutiny. But in this case, one conversation allegedly did the exact opposite. It leaked in fragments, through sources, media channels, and social media whispers, igniting a firestorm that no one could contain. And suddenly, the story shifted from rumor to perceived reality. The alleged conversation reportedly occurred between Meghan Markle and a senior palace official. Details remain unverified, but the implications, as reported by multiple outlets, were explosive. Observers claim the conversation touched on Archie's biological parentage, the timing of past events, and internal responses to emerging rumors. Even without confirmation, the narrative surrounding the conversation captivated global attention. Because in high-stakes environments, a single private exchange can carry more weight than weeks of public statements. Let's pause and examine why this matters. Words spoken privately are often candid, unfiltered, and raw. They reveal emotions, intentions, and vulnerabilities that public statements deliberately conceal. And when those words are leaked, they carry authority. They are interpreted as truth precisely because they were not meant to be public. The public assumes candor, authenticity, and immediacy. And in this case, the alleged conversation was treated as a window into decisions, reactions, and emotional states that had previously been opaque. Observers note several key elements that make this alleged conversation particularly significant. First, the context. The discussion reportedly occurred shortly after the palace allegedly revealed information about Archie's parentage. The timing suggests urgency, emotional intensity, and high stakes. Second, the content. According to reports, Meghan's alleged words indicated both surprise and determination, signals that she was reacting to information that directly affected her and her child. Third, the leak itself. The mere fact that the conversation reached the public, intentionally or not, amplified drama, speculation, and scrutiny exponentially. It's worth considering the psychological impact. For Meghan, being confronted, or confronted indirectly, with allegations about Archie's parentage is deeply personal. For the palace, a private conversation leaking undermines control, authority, and discretion. And for the public, it's irresistible. We are wired to respond to secrets revealed, to emotional candor, and to interpersonal drama. The alleged conversation ticked every box, instantly becoming a focal point for discussion, analysis, and debate. Observers also highlight the strategic dimensions. If the conversation was genuine, it may have been an attempt by Meghan to clarify, assert control, or confront misinformation. If portions were selectively leaked, the leak itself becomes a strategic weapon, intended or accidental, influencing perception, shaping narrative, or destabilizing opponents. Either way, the result is the same: global attention, escalating speculation, and narrative acceleration. And here's the emotional layer that keeps the story gripping. Reported fragments suggest intensity, anger, frustration, concern, and determination. Whether fully accurate or exaggerated by reporting, the public interprets emotional cues as signals of authenticity. Emotions, after all, are more relatable than facts alone. A perceived outburst or decisive statement resonates in a way that timelines or documents cannot. It humanizes the story while simultaneously raising stakes. This alleged conversation also intersects with previous elements in the narrative. The leaked document, whispers of another woman, and inconsistencies in timelines all converge here. Observers piece together the puzzle. The private words of a central figure offer context for decisions, reactions, and subsequent actions. Suddenly, Meghan's alleged flight, palace silence, and media frenzy are part of a coherent, emotionally charged story that appears both inevitable and shocking. But the story doesn't stop at interpretation. Social media amplified every detail, real or alleged, dissecting phrases, tone, and context. Opinion threads flourished. What did she mean by that? Was this defensive or aggressive? Could this confirm the rumors? Even those skeptical of the leak were drawn into analysis because the story felt immediate, raw, and consequential. And in this amplification, the alleged conversation gained its own life, separate from verification or factual accuracy. What makes this chapter of the story especially dramatic is the combination of secrecy, immediacy, and consequence. Private conversations are supposed to contain emotions and information. Once they escape, every actor in the story, the subject, advisors, and observers, is forced to navigate perception, interpretation, and reaction. Suddenly, there is no neutral space. Every decision is scrutinized, every word is magnified, and the narrative accelerates beyond control. Consider also the narrative implications for Archie. Even if only perceived, the leak touches on questions of identity, lineage, and protection. Alleged statements by Meghan about her child evoke universal instincts: concern, maternal instinct, and the desire